I'm Jennifer Lee.
And I'm Pablo Castro. We're Obra Architects.
We love the idea of the character of the text, the cats, because obviously there are millions of cats in Seoul, and they're occupants of the city, just like the rest of the Seoul citizens.
I like the way in which proposing the creation of an architectural project based on an unrelated notion or a not directly related notion, like cats taking over an empty city, propose thinking about architecture in a way that was a little bit deeper than simply trying to resolve practical problems. I thought the idea of cats as invading an empty city was interesting because emptiness could be best represented by a crowd. You only know that a place is empty when you have experienced that place before full of people. Otherwise it's not empty, it's just deserted. It's like the concept of nothingness. Nothingness doesn't really make any sense unless you have the concept of something. So for this was the same thing. So for us, the cat house and the representation of an empty city had to start with a place of assembly in which potentially a lot of people could come. So our proposal was to create some content that would attract people, that would give them biennales meaning, and then maybe if the pandemic did not allow us to create that crowd of people, we could still have the content blaring in the emptiness of the Seunsanka Plaza with nobody there,
Anything you do honestly stems from a reaction to the current times around you. But I think the fortunate coincidence of this project right now is that we can now embrace the emptiness and just have the cat house sitting there with no audience and still work as a kind of connector screen to everyone. Unfortunate moment where we're unable to go to Seoul, we're unable to travel, people are unable to gather again, but it's sort of a perfect moment where we can actually just let the screen be and connect to the people, still be a platform, be a kind of billboard, a message and still a gift to the citizens of Seoul. So I'm actually still super excited about its possibilities right now, even more so.
And then the other aspect is the fact that the project, it happens to be sitting on a slope surface. So that's unusual, but then that is also incorporated as an essential element of the project. So the fact that there's a slope surface gets translated into a raked space, sort of like a theater, and then the theater implies a screen. But the screen also relates to the fact that we might be able to use the space in person or not. We might have to rely on media, and then that screen allows us to do what we're doing right now, which is sitting at different ends of the world, but still being together. If you triangulate a structure, it becomes super efficient. So we have two triangulated walls, and in the middle we have a diaphragm, and we have a kind of a cloth, a very light roof that is shaped by the enemy of structure, which is gravity. So you have this kind of natural element, there's sort of like an architectural cat, if you like, which is the belly of the canvas that acquires the form that nature gives it. And then you have this sort of very rational use of very little material, which is these two walls that are shaped as trusses. So there's a very sharp, strong contrast that is achieved by very, very, very little material. So that was sort of the kind of technical aspect of how to realize this confrontation between nature and humans, the city and the cats and so on.
because we're away and the resources are limited, I found a friend of mine, E. Sangam. He offered to help us do the project without us having to go to Korea. He found a carpenter, someone that works with wood really well. So that was one reason for changing the project, because originally we didn't know if it was going to be in metal or in wood, but we did want it to be light, just to sit lightly on the site. And so because my friend Sangam has a friend who's a carpenter, we decided to make it in wood. And then we wanted to do all these metal connections between the different pieces of wood, so the piece could be disassembled and take it somewhere else. But the carpenter didn't want to do that. He said, I can make it like a big piece of furniture instead of making it an assembly object that has metal brackets and bolts, more like construction. So we said, okay, make it like a traditional Korean architecture, with wood pegs and making the joints all wood, no metal. So to make it stronger that way, we added those diagonals. We turned the entire facade into a structural element as a kind of truss now. So then it became really strong, and it could be made with just thinner pieces of wood. We had originally thought that this room would be a kind of projection room, Projection is very important for architecture because of perspective. Perspective and projection are basically the same thing. But we wanted to have a projector in which this material could be displayed, broadcast into the space. But during the day, projection doesn't work. So we had to change the project again. And the way we changed it, we thought we could get a matrix of all monitors and digital distributor of the image. So the image will be pieced up into the monitors as a kind of puzzle. The TV screens now need to be installed in such a way that if it's rain or wind, they don't get damaged. So we had to introduce a new element, which is a kind of safety element to protect the screens when it rains, this sort of fabric, just a piece of fabric, to evacuate the water. So when it rains, the water will sort of stream out due to the shape that gravity gives the fabric. So way of protecting a certain space from the weather. What we like about it is that it has very little material, it's very light, but the strength doesn't come from putting too much material in it. It just comes from the geometry of the facade, from this sort of triangulation, that makes it very strong. So it's, one of the traditional objectives of architecture always is to get the most with the least. You get the best possible arrangement. You get a high ceiling, space for everybody, good proportions, a lot of light, good views. And then you don't invest too much. You don't have to put too much material. You just always try to do the minimum. It's supposed to intentionally be messageless. It's meant to be a venue for other people's message, for the people of the city in Seoul. And then there's a giant message board, this assembly of screens in which people can tell each other things even if they're not there.
So we thought that this was a really good idea because a way of democratizing the event, bringing in people that are not part of it officially, So we think that the Biennale in Seoul is also a prime space in which this could happen and people could have access and you could hear other voices that are not so strongly curated. So our hope is to be able to convince people to participate, and to be part of it. So that's, one of the main hopes, right? Bring people together this way around the possibility of democratizing culture, by having everybody participate. Whether they're good or they're bad, it doesn't matter.